before I let you go, Bob, that moment that Chris Collinsworth described on Sunday Night Football with you and Al watching Vin Scully sign off together, paint that word picture for me, Bob, and what was that like?
Well, Al had his sling box up in the booth.
Yes.
As you know, I'm not the world's most tech-savvy guy, so I turned to Al, and he had the game on, and we were watching, and it was in the late innings, and the timing was just right because we come on the air at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. We were in Pittsburgh, and the Dodgers came up in the top of the ninth. It wasn't a close game. I think the score was 7-1, so you knew the game was about to end, and it was about 6:10, 6:15, so we had just enough time, and Al's preparation was already done, and I didn't have to get down to the field for several more minutes, and the Dodgers went quietly in the top of the ninth, and we were watching, anxious to see what Vin would say in signing off, and it was so simple and yet so elegant and perfect. He said almost nothing. As the game ended, he noted that the Giants had won the wild card and a celebration was ongoing in San Francisco, and then he said something to the effect of, I have said enough goodbyes for a lifetime, and so just one last time, I wish you all a very pleasant good evening. And then they dipped to black for just a moment, and then there was a very short piece, maybe 90 seconds, that he narrated that took him from the day 80 years prior to the day that he became an 8-year-old baseball fan of the then New York Giants, and kind of in a brief overview touched upon his career. And then they came back to him in the booth, and again, it was very brief. Maybe it was a minute. And he'd simply thanked people, and while it was touching, he didn't choke up. And he ended by saying, when winter turns back to spring, rest assured that once again it will be time for Dodger baseball, which was one of his signature phrases. But the poignant implication is, for the first time ever in Los Angeles, Dodger baseball without me, it will be time for Dodger baseball. And so for this last time, I wish you all a very pleasant good evening wherever you may be. And that was how it ended. Al Michaels is a pretty darn good broadcaster. You make the list of the greatest sportscasters who have ever lived, you're not going to use up many fingers before you get to Al Michaels. He's pretty darn good. And I've been around too. And both of us we looked at each other and we said, yeah, that's what the craft is about. That's as close to perfection as you're going to get. And I think we both also realized that no one else, no matter how good, will ever have the circumstances that Vin had. Dick Enberg is one of the greatest broadcasters ever. In the 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s, if there was a decathlon of sports broadcasting play-by-play, he probably would have won it. He was so good at so many different sports across the spectrum. But there's a difference between a national broadcaster, no matter how good, and the local broadcaster, and the bond that local broadcaster, especially in baseball, day in, day out, generational connections, the bond that local broadcaster has with his audience. And in this case, you're talking about 67 years, and from 1958 on in one city, no matter how good a broadcaster is, that person can never match the combination of Vin Scully's skill and the eras that he spans and the circumstances that surround his career. So we knew we were looking at something that was not once in a generation, not once in a lifetime, but once and forever.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.